architecture decision records.
Yeah.
Very short.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Tobias Unger. I'm solution architect at Opitz Consulting and operation contributor. Maybe I should use the wording core contributor, but because that will become important during the talk. Yeah. So with Operaton-1, as mentioned today, focus was stabilizing, and now we are going or shifting the focus towards 1.1, 2.0, and it's shifting from stability to evolution, new features, new libraries, etc., etc. So, and that's why we decided to start with ADRs. Dat is goed zo? Okay. And why do we do that? So we are currently discussing a lot of possible changes. Well, we had it here during the podium with the Java Spring baseline, adding more BPMN, DMN functionality, security functionality, and a lot of further stuff. So, and that aren't cosmetic changes. They are going deep in the engine. For example, if we add an ad hoc subprocess, we're going deep in the engine implementation. So, and that affects the architecture for years. And that's why we need a transparent decision making with a clear foundation before we really go into the change in the code base. And also it supports early documentation. So we hope that we don't have then an architecture drift between the documentation, the ADRs in English, at the code base. What are the goals of using ADRs? So first is, of course, preserve knowledge. So it's our architecture memory. For us as an open source project, it's also very important to speed up onboarding. So people can read these ADRs and think, okay, that's why they did that. That's why they use Spring 4 and don't Spring Boot 4, and they don't support Spring Boot 3 anymore, for example. Just examples, I'm using examples that are not decided yet, so don't take this too serious, but what I use as example. Also, in a lot of projects, you have this repeated debates. Every half a year, somebody came around, oh, why do we use Kafka and not MQ Series? So if you have a clear documentation on that, you can point to that documentation and also enable traceability. So maybe in 5 years, we can look back on our decisions and maybe can say, oh, that was a good decision, that was a bad decision, or that decision must be that decision must be replaced by a new decision. So the key concepts are very, very easy. I don't want to go deep in that. The most important thing for us is the architectural decision record. It's a simply short document in Markdown that captures the decision, context, options, and the consequences. I will go deeper in that later on. So basically, the architectural decisions answers why questions. That's the why of the word why. Why it's called the why statement, and the why statement helps us to express cleanly in long one sentence. In this context, we are facing that forces. We choose option X or we choose option Y to achieve goal Z, accepting the trade-off Y. So if we can't express it like that, in that simple format, then people say the decision is not ready yet. And writing this out forces us to name the real drivers, the real alternative, the benefits we want, and very importantly, the downside we are accepting. So, as everybody knows, there's always a trade-off with every decision, and also we want to document that. It's like clarity check before things land in the code base. Then also, that's not the main focus of this talk, but I decided to also show this slide. So we have an Operaton, also with the audience here, we have contributors and we have users. So the talk here is mainly on decisions shaping operation internals. So what we as contributors do, but also the concept of ADRs or ADRs is also for everyone. Using Operaton can use this, e.g. maybe to decide the process engine bootstrapping, integration choices, whether I use Spring Boot, Wildfly, Tomcat distribution, Quarkus, CDI, whatever. But those decisions are part of the individual project. So we are on this side. So for example, decisions like, do we support 2 field engines in DMN field engines in the next release, or what's with APIs extensions? Do we have cross-cutting changes, e.g. migrating to Jackson 3 because all package names are changing, something like that. So these decisions are part of the Operaton project. And this format is Matter, or called Matter. It's a simple markdown file. So it's simple, it works with Git. And there's a screenshot on the slide. If you go to docs decision in the repository, they're all living this ADRs. Currently 1, to be honest. There is a file with README. There are a lot of instructions for how to write ADRs, how to review ADRs, etc., etc. But also important is when to write one. So not everything is an architectural decision. If you simply change some configuration, that's not an architecture decision. So it should be impactful, cross-cutting, or decisions that are hard to revert. But also there are examples in the README. So that's an example of the Matter template. We have the core. That's the core section. So there are more sections, but that's the core sections, and that's the example of our first and currently only ADR. So we start with the context and problem statement. Why do we do that now? And when do we do that? And then in the second section, we have the decisions driver, top 3 to 5 factors. So in our decision, we have 5. So if you take that example, it's the null safety strategy for Operaton. Then the decision driver is, for example, improve clarity and safety of operation public APIs regarding nullability. So that's the decision driver here. Next section is obviously the decision. So in the template, you see that there's another section. It's not mentioned here. It's the considered options. Next section, the consequences. So the very important thing is here, the positive, the negative, and the risk. So we're also documenting the positive and negative things. Also with the alternatives, we document the pros and cons. So we can use also the cons maybe later on if we decide to revalidate the decision or replace the decision. And then there's the last section, confirmation, how the decision will be validated, e.g. by review, or where they write a unit test or something like that.
Some parts were missing.
Some parts were missing? Yeah, it was only... What, sorry?
The example.
The example goes... it's longer than the slide. So if we open it's a document. You can go to the repository and there it lives. And that's the typical workflow for an open source project like ours. So open a draft of the decision, then open the discussion before the ADR becomes proposed with some, to speak, open feedback window. So that's not decided yet, but it should be flexible and maybe longer for an open source project than a normal project within a company. And that's why I mentioned the core contributors. The approval for an architectural decision requires the approval for at least 3 core contributors, and that are contributors that are elected in the forum. So what I will do in the next 2 weeks, I think, is that I will add the workflow to the README. So currently, if you read the README, there's a lot of stuff, but the only thing it's really missing is the workflow. So we will add that. So and then the second last slide, that are some tips and tricks for writing good ADRs. So use a clear, conscious language. So it's not marketing. We don't need long sentences, clear and conscious. Structure, I showed the slides before. What's also important, be explicit about trade-offs. So it's not to sell options. It's really about the trade-offs. That's the advantage of a solution. We go for the solution, but we know that it also has consequences and that it has cons. Make the context visible, otherwise people will not understand why the decision was made. What's also important is link issues, PRs and related ADRs. And I think what we learned the last months, and we'll also think it will last for another few months, that it's a learning process to write these ADRs, to make them with a clear, conscious language, to define options. So that's a learning process. So it was a very short talk, 10 minutes. Yeah. So we are open source project. I will invite everybody. Please contribute to the project, propose ADRs, participate in discussions. So even a like will help. So help to shape operations, long-time direction. And check out ADR at GitHub.io. So there are a lot of more information on ADRs. Thank you. Now I'm open for questions.
Machen wir nachher in der Pause.